policies are focused narrowly on the protection of human subjects, and the protection of the vulnerable is guided by a distorted view of theoretical underpinnings of informed consent. There has been an exaggerated, according to this view, exaggerated emphasis on informed consent that distorts our ethical understanding of the appropriate moral standards for human subject research and points us away from the moral goals that we should strive to achieve. Okay, all theoretical so far, it makes us even more sleepy. So what sort this criticism by Rhodes says, these views are based on some errors of analysis of the Nazi experience. She says, what we have done is to misidentify the problems of Nazi research, and there's been a mishandling of the concept of autonomy in its application to human subject research. Let's elaborate a bit on that. Looking at the features of horrific Nazi research, the criticism says, well, the Nazi research inflicted risks and burdens on a lot of people. I'm assuming, of course, that you're familiar with the examples of Nazi research. I won't go into that. They violated the most basic principle of morality, which is do not treat another as you would not be treated. These researchers devalued a portion of their population and treated them in a way that they recognized was grossly unacceptable for the rest. Thus, there was violation of equality and fairness. There was also the idea of sacrificing one group, the concentration camp inmates, for example, for the benefit of another, military personnel. And many studies were poorly designed and could not answer the research question that it was trying to answer, or that they were trying to answer. So the general idea now is that the horrific features are not properly addressed by ensuring the validity of informed consent. The criticism is that whether you got the informed consent or not was not important, because those were just by themselves horrific exercises. Okay. So how do we deal with the concept of autonomy in that context? This paper, that not my paper, but the paper I'm critiquing, says, well, we should take for granted the concept of presumptive autonomy, or what Rhodes calls second-person sense of autonomy. The second-person sense of autonomy simply presumes that others can and do make autonomous choices for themselves. In the absence of evidence to the contrary, we presume that they do make autonomous choices, referring here to vulnerable populations. On the contrary, what we are doing now, according to this view, what we are doing mostly is, what standard accounts do, is to deny the presumption of autonomy to entire classes of vulnerable individuals. The idea is, when we do not want to involve vulnerable populations in research, we do that because we presume that they are not capable of acting autonomously. But there is something wrong with that, I think, because if we routinely presume that many vulnerable populations are indeed autonomous, we will erroneously take for granted that they have fully understood the process, because that's what presumed or presumptive autonomy means. then the subjects could be exposed to risks that they have not had or that they will not have had an opportunity to assess. Another point made by Rhodes is that we should not consider autonomy for the non-autonomous, that is again in relation to the vulnerable populations, where those who are vulnerable because they are, by the nature of their condition, not capable of understanding what is going on. So they are non-autonomous in that sense. If they are mentally incompetent, then they are non-autonomous because they cannot understand, even if you explain, and they cannot make a voluntary decision because the voluntariness, the capacity for voluntary decision making is compromised. So, Rhodes says, respect for autonomy is a rule that applies only to moral persons, beings who are capable of self-determination. But these vulnerable, they are not capable of self-determination. Human beings who lack decisional capacity should be treated with beneficence, but not respect for something that is absent, because respect for something that is absent makes no sense. Is that all so difficult for an after-lunch talk? Okay. But I think the contrary should be our view, that the non-autonomous deserve even greater protection than the autonomous, precisely because of their vulnerability. And second, there are acceptable ways of discovering that some non-autonomous individuals desire or would have desired for themselves. At this point, I'm reminded of some classic cases, not in relation to research, but in euthanasia. There is, let me cite two examples. There is a case of a person named Paul Brophy. Paul Brophy was a fireman. And at one time, Paul Brophy rushed into the scene of a fire, and when he rushed inside, he saw a child whom he was in a position to rescue. So he took the child and brought the child to the hospital. Unfortunately, the child had already suffered severe burns. The day after he brought the child to the hospital, he went to the hospital to visit the child with his wife. And when he saw the condition that the child was in, he whispered to his wife, "I regret having saved her life and having brought her here." Okay. Years later, Paul Brophy, this fireman, suffered a medical condition, and he happened to be comatose. And when the wife was asked what to do with him, the wife said, "Well, I heard him say this before about that child, and I think this is what he would want for himself now, that he should not be put, or that this medical contraption should be removed." Okay. Another case involved a bioethics professor by the name of Brother Storar. Brother Storar, when he was in class, always when he discussed euthanasia, always rigorously argued in favor of euthanasia. He said, "Oh, if you're like this, then you should prefer to die than to remain alive, but in this condition." So his students always heard him say that. Years later, he was in a hospital suffering from some condition, and the students gave testimony to the effect that he always gave that kind of lecture, and the court ruled that that's a good indication of what he would have wanted for himself. we may disagree with those cases. What I'm simply saying is that there are ways of making inferences as to what people would perhaps autonomously decide for themselves rather than for us to be making decisions for them. Then there is the view that autonomy is counterproductive. Protecting research subjects from other groups based on their classification as vulnerable does not show respect for their autonomy. Rhodes gives the example of the captain of a ship. He says, in a storm, this captain tosses his goods overboard in order to save himself, his crew, and his ship. No one would imagine that the captain would choose to be in that situation, but given that he finds himself there, the captain is making a reasonable choice that reflects his priorities. The sick can be regarded as like the captain of a sinking ship. Though they have limited choices about participation in research, their decision made under pressure should nevertheless be respected. And research policy must recognize that not all influences are problematic and aim at distinguishing unacceptable coercion from acceptable inducements and influences that are and must be part of life. I agree with that. I agree that there are exceptions, but that exceptions must be regarded as exceptions. Exceptions represent variations from the norm. They should not be regarded as the rule. Let me go on to our next point related to this. What about required research service? Rhodes makes the proposal that research participation should be made a social or enforceable duty because we appreciate the severe consequences of human vulnerability to injury and disease, and to withhold endorsement of such a policy would be to take advantage of the kindness of others and be a free rider. If we take advantage of the benefits of medical research, we are being free riders if we do not serve also as research subjects. But I say no to that because even if you benefit from medical research, citizens already pay for the benefits of others' research participation. I don't know in Thailand, but in the Philippines, there is no good medical government health plan, so the citizens pay individually for the benefits of others' research participation, the cost of medical goods and services, or even through non-medical share of the community burden. Where you get some assistance from the government, you also pay for that through taxes or through some other kind of assistance. And the general idea is we do not all have to serve as firemen in order to repay firemen for their services. We repay firemen for their services by being good policemen, if we were policemen, or by being tax-paying citizens, if we were other types of citizens. We don't all have to pay for one kind of service through exactly the same kind of service. And equally importantly, the criteria for the inclusion of subjects in a particular research project are so specific, and it will be too cumbersome to factor in that idea that some citizens are required to render research subject duty. If you were in a trial for patients with asthma, then there will be strict requirements that you do not have this or that, or that you have this or that. And those conditions are the ones that dictate whether you qualify or not, and it will be too cumbersome to have to factor in the fact that you are now required to give this kind of duty. So several items in the conclusion. Yes, indeed, vulnerability should continue to be recognized as a basis for increased protection and affirmative action, and in order to eliminate opportunities for discrimination. abandoning the informed consent framework for ethics review will result in more harm than good, especially when we see that a lot of international research is being done by powerful firms in places where a lot of vulnerabilities exist among the population. And when 90% of health research is being done to promote the interests of the 10% who are rich and powerful. Exceptions to informed consent requirements should be accepted in some cases, but these exceptions should not become the dominant rule. Remember that the Nazi research atrocities were not just random and whimsical acts of cruelty, but calculated steps to promote health goods for the general public. Now, we do not want to be saying that people ought to render research service because it promotes the public health and commit Nazi-type atrocities all over again. That's it, if you're still awake.
Thank you. Mina, please. Yes.
Thank you, Leo. I do not want to start Kantian philosophy debate here, but I have the view you represented in your talk was based on just one aspect of the debate, that which says moral actor in healthcare research, but not what about moral agent and duty of the actors to empower. So when you say about autonomy to the non-autonomous, so the duty of the autonomous to empower the non-autonomous to become autonomous is an interesting question, because if you read some of the recent literature where we talk about the concept of responsiveness and new principle of responsiveness, in that regard, this question of autonomy to the non-autonomous will hold true? I don't know.
I agree with the way you put it, but I don't agree with the way the Rhodes paper puts it. No? I mean, the way you put it, the non-autonomous must be given assistance, affirmative action, perhaps, so that they will become autonomous and be able to exercise their self-determination. But I don't agree with the idea that those who are non-autonomous must be seen precisely as non-autonomous, and therefore as not having to be asked about their desires and so on.
Well, they're still a moral agent, though.
That's right. Yes, I agree that they are still moral agents. We should take for granted that they are moral agents, and we should, as much as possible, try to, on the basis of some other evidence, determine what they really would have freely decided for themselves.
But that's the part of capacity building, isn't it? Empowerment or capacity building, because they don't know about it. So we just cannot regard them as just being non-autonomous.
That's right. I agree with you.
Okay. Justin, please.
Thank you for a very good presentation and explanation of what is going on at the international level. I mean, there are two aspects of research candidates who normally come into people who become part of the research, and they're usually students and usually people with economic problems. So there is really, in a sense, there is no autonomy there, because they are participating because of other external economic pressures. They are economic vulnerable people where there is no protections for them. Secondly, I think statement from there and your own critical viewpoint goes on to again reinforce a point that I have been making. I don't think there is a concept of universal norms. It's a construction. The concept of universal norms, because in societies where an individual is born and thinks that the person is part of society and there are mutual obligations, the concept of self-determination, autonomy, it becomes not irrelevant but is less enforced. In societies where the individual rights are very strong, of course what you're saying makes a lot of meaning. And that remains my basic problem with the whole concept of the UN-driven universal norms, universal consent, universal thing. It seems no different than the whole Judeo-Christian idea of the universal message. Now it's being perpetuated through a different idea of the universal norms. When is there going to be a genuine dialogue of you come to me and listen to me what I have to say, and I come to you and listen to you what you have to say? Is there any chance that we may have moved to that, or we continue to go on the concept of universal norms? Thank you.
I think I can agree with you when you say universal norms are a construct. That's what most of these ethical concepts are. From a certain perspective, they are constructs. In other words, they don't just lie there waiting for us or waiting to be discovered by us. They are things, I might say, that we construct in the process of dialogue. I mean that they're not necessarily universal in the sense of being somewhere waiting for this to be discovered, or universal in the sense of something that everybody will agree on, but universal in the sense of being, maybe I can say, all within our sights. Let me give you an example insofar as informed consent is concerned. If you think of informed consent as being as relating to the individual, then I do not necessarily agree with that. The autonomous entity need not be the individual. It could be within certain cultures the family, or it could be even something broader in other cultures. So it's up for discussion. I do not necessarily subscribe to the idea of that. Autonomy must be always understood in relation to the individual, the single individual.
Thank you. Aruna is next, and then I have two more people, and I have to refuse the others. I'm sorry.
You were talking about vulnerability, autonomy, and informed consent. In my opinion, informed consent has got nothing to do with education. Autonomy has got nothing to do with education. Vulnerability has got nothing to do with education. Because some time back in Kerala, where most of the population are very highly educated, one university from a different country, they came to Kerala, took the consent, informed consent of autonomous people who are not vulnerable, and they conducted experiments with them on a drug which is supposed to safeguard them from cancer. When it came to the knowledge of ICMR, Indian Council for Medical Research, they rushed to the place and they had to request that particular university to vacate, and they should not continue with their research because the people are not well informed. Even though the concerned university was arguing that they are well informed, they were not well informed according to the government of India, which is true. If you want me to give the name of the country and the university, I will, but otherwise I'll keep it. It's a secret.
Maybe everybody else knows.
Okay. I have Subrata and Nalko, and so Subrata next, please. Okay.
Thank you for your nice presentation. It was, I really enjoyed it. You told that that exceptions are not the norms, and surgery, emergency, people who are sick could be considered sometimes as the exception. But if you think that the medical establishment is part of the reality, and most of the people are not diseased or sick at any given period of time, but that's part of the reality. Now, to illustrate the point, I am giving an example. Just while crossing the road from this hotel, I had an automobile accident, and I am bleeding and I am unconscious. Now, there is no point or time for Daryl to contact my family back home in India, and while I am unconscious and I am bleeding, I was rushed to the hospital, and then I was found that I had ruptured spleen. Now, they identified me that I am participating in UNESCO conference, and Daryl being in charge of the whole scenario, now the telephone comes to Daryl. Now, I have full love and trust for Daryl that he will be taking the best decision given the scenario, although I have not written something in the paper. Now, if Daryl thinks that he will be waiting for the response from my family to come here and take a decision, by the time I will be up heaven or hell or whatever. So Daryl has to take a decision. Now, if you put the informed consent as the legal binding, then Daryl will be legal, but I will be dying. And another point is that Daryl might not be legal, but I might be saved. What you will be doing?
I think Daryl will be dying faced with that decision. No, that's one of the exceptional circumstances that we speak of. Yeah, I mean, I don't even think someone will consult Daryl. I don't think he will be in a legal position where he can be the one to make the decision. My point is, earlier on I said, precisely, that's one of the situations when exceptions could be permitted. In the US, even emergency research is covered by certain regulations. They say if the situation is like this and like that, then you need not consult maybe the relatives, but there is a hospital institution that you should consult for something like this, and so on and so forth.
Well, I decide to go to heaven, but it's not my decision, it's God's decision. So actually, and also, in fact, yesterday you went on this dangerous bus trip, and then Sophie, my colleague, was a bit concerned about the insurance questions. UNESCO doesn't normally do field trips, she said, because of insurance, and I said, well, just pray. So anyway, I'm not sure if it worked. At least we were lucky. So, I think, as Leo said, it would be a matter for the hospital ethics committee here, and they would decide based on the presumption to keep you alive until they could contact. Anyway, I have actually two more questions. Naoko and then Chirapal.
You've partially answered this, I believe, but when informed consent is given through a chief or a leader of a group of people, where that's the culture, in your opinion, do you think that should be accepted and respected by the group of researchers?
That's a very difficult question to answer without the knowledge of how things are in this particular community where such a chief makes decisions. You remind me actually of a case study known to most of the people who have had some training in research ethics here, of a research protocol where researchers from the sponsoring country come to this community, and they want to be able to ask the individual participants for consent, but the chieftain says, well, whatever I say, that goes. He doesn't have to consult everyone. He just calls everyone to a feast and feeds everybody, and once everybody is full and drunk, then he says, this is going to happen. But that's the way it goes in that community. But the way the story ends there is no settlement, because the chief says, well, if you prefer to go to the individual subjects, you better go home, because this research is not going to push through. But I wouldn't be able to make a decision unless I know this, in this particular community how things go. Is it that this chieftain is so well loved and so popular with the people that they really trust him to be making decisions? Has his decisions in the past been such that he has not taken advantage of the people? Has he not received money or other similar considerations from external entities and then given permission for these external entities to conduct research on his people? I think we have to be guided by experience with this particular community.
Okay, Jiropon, please. Last comment.
It's not a question, just a comment on the informed consent. To me, I think there is a condition for informed consent. First of all, there has to be adequacy of the information disclosed in the informed consent process. That's the first thing that should happen. And in order for the informed consent to be valid, as you mentioned about the validity of the informed consent, I think the participants have to understand. So it should be understood consent for the consent to be valid. And informed consent is not just a piece of paper, and it is not a sign here, please. That's not the point of informed consent to me. Understanding what is disclosed in the consent process is the most important for informed consent to be valid.
I think we agree on that. Yeah. Thank you very much, Leo. The next paper is by Yangguan Wang from China, and I should note that in the program, Sompan Prompter from Thailand is ill today, so cannot give us paper. So we are skipping one. That's why we have a bit of time up our sleeve. Thank you.
Firstly, I should send my thanks to UNESCO and Dr. Mesa. Invite me here and meet all old friends and new friends, and the TRT round table here. So every time I have a good time. Today I would like to say something about the Chinese stem cell research. The situation of the embryonic stem cell research in China. The human embryonic stem cell research is developing quickly in China. From the first international symposium on stem cell research and another one, we found there are many institutes which are engaged in EM research in the mainland of China. And at least there are more than 20 leading individuals who are devoting themselves to stem cell research in their institutes in more than 10 big cities. From the second international symposium on stem cell research held in Beijing, China, on December 2003, we found much more personal and institutes which engage in the stem cell research. The Chinese presenters attended the first and second international symposium on stem cell research came from Beijing, Shanghai, Nanjing, Guangzhou, Shandong, Dalian, Chongqing, Xi'an, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and etc. Some topic there. so I skipped some because time. In January 2004, guidelines for research on human embryonic stem cells was jointly released by the Ministry of Science and Technology and the Ministry of Health in Beijing, China. Guidelines for research on human embryonic stem cells is based on the draft of Beijing and the draft of Shanghai. This is a translate of this guideline. Article 1, in order to comply the research of human embryonic stem cell in the field of biomedicine in China, with the international bioethical guidelines and the Chinese bioethical guidelines or regulations, and to promote the healthy development of human embryonic stem cell research, this guideline was issued. Article 1, in the guideline, the concept of the human embryonic stem cells include the stem cell derived from human embryos, the stem cell derived from human germ cells, the stem cell derived from human germ cells, the stem cell derived from human blastula or monosexual split blastula by somatic cell nucleus transfer technique. Article 3, any research on human embryonic stem cells inside the boundary of China should be done in accordance with this guideline. Article 4, any research on human reproductive cloning should be prohibited. Article 5, the human embryonic stem cell used for research can be derived from spared gametes or blastula remaining after in IVF, fetal cells after neutral or voluntarily selective abortion, blastula or monosexual split blastula by somatic cell nuclear transfer technique, and germ cells voluntarily donated. Article 6, the conduct of human embryo stem cell research must comply with the following norms. Any blastula obtained by IVF, somatic cell nucleus transfer technique, monosexual reproductive technique, or genetic modification cannot be cultured in ex vivo for longer than 14 days since fertilization or nucleus transfer. The implantation of any human blastula obtained by IVF, somatic cell nuclear transfer technique to human and other animals' reproductive system are prohibited. Article 6, the hybrid between human germ cells and other species germ cells is prohibited. Buying and selling human gamete fertilization egg, embryo, and fetal tissue are prohibited. The principle of informed consent and informed choice, the saying of informed consent and informed form, and the protection of subjects' privacy must be adhered in the conduct of human embryonic stem cell research. Any institute which engaged in human embryonic stem cell research should make their own conduct guidelines and administration procedures in detail following this ethical guideline. There are disputes about whether or not to issue an ethical guideline and regulation on HES cell research for a long time in mainland of China. From the proceedings or rules of Xiangshan Conference on Life Science Policy and Ethics and other meetings address these issues, we can know some Chinese bioethics and government officials have made a great effort to description and prescription of the ethical issues drafted in the guideline, regulatory recommendation and ethical guidelines. But there were still large numbers of bioethics government officials, scientists, and public had a strong argument against. An argument was to respect the freedom of scientific research in any condition. Argument stronger by using the theory of Marxism that moral decline should be based on the developing level of science and technology. The moral values should be changed following the development of science and technology. Articles emphasize the pragmatic urge to obey the dictate of the global market, as well as to aggressively probe the economic and medical promotes of stem cell therapy and Chinese cultural integrity and national identity. The counter-argument: there are dilemmas between scientific freedom and ethical constraints. Science and technology is a double-edged sword, which should benefit humanity and in the same time could do harm to humanity. There is no absolute scientific freedom. Any scientific research should be given an appropriate benefit-risk assessment to any involved elements. This makes the ethical constraints in sense. Moral values do change following the development of the science and technology, but the principles of respect, do no harm, and beneficence will not change. Ethical issues on the source of human embryonic stem cells. We can know the source of stem cell research from Article 5. The ethical issues on the source of human embryonic stem cell in mainland China are how to protect the donors, how to execute the principle of informed consent in the Chinese clinics. There were many abortion cases in mainland of China. The physician could get the cadaveric fetal tissue without the mother's informed consent in some places. The physician could use the frozen embryos or gametes remaining after IVF without the mother's informed consent in some places during past years. Such situation should be forbidden. If we ethical issues on the source of human embryonic stem cell, the hybrid research and egg donation are allowed by the guideline for future stem cell research. The ethical issue of hybrid turn to be how to guarantee the woman's right who donated them germ cell voluntarily. Ethical issues about research the embryos. We can know research the embryo from Article 6. There are objections from a small part of scientists and scholars from native country of China. They argue that HES cell research should be forbidden because if human beings go against the nature law, human beings will be punished by nature. HES cell research violated human dignity, and this is a big challenge to the human life. But the majority of bioethicists from native country argue that an embryo is not a person. An embryo still is a human biological life. A human embryo has a certain value. It deserves due to respect. But if there are no reasons, it can be used. To with spared gamete or blastula remaining after IVF, and the fetal cells after neutral or voluntarily selective abortion, the ethical issue is not an issue of destructive embryo research. It is an issue that the fate of cells from embryos which are already destroyed. To the blastula or monosexual split blastulas by somatic cell nucleus transfer technique. This is an ethical issue of creating embryos for research. The majority of biologists from a native country urge that human embryo cannot be manipulated or damaged without sufficient reason. It is wrong to deliberately create and destroy embryo for research. It is also wrong to create and destroy a person for research. Destructive embryo research should only be approved in exceptional circumstances. Some bioethicists further claimed that a 14 days old could be used for research, reported a view of the moral standards of the embryo fetus from the medical science. A 14 days old embryo is a cluster of cells without bones, organs of other traits. They have a consciousness around 20 weeks. Some scientists supported using embryo to do research within 14 days, meaning that to object embryo research is inconsistent with values implicit in society, because there were so many abortions in mainland China. Also, if opposition to the use of spare embryos from IVF is seen as really opposition to IVF, because frozen embryos could be destroyed if fertilized couples were permitted to destroy unwanted embryos rather than to donate them to other couples. To the public in China, ethical issue about embryo research was not an issue about supporting or objecting the research embryos within 14 days, or not an issue about the standard of embryo, fetus, or infant. What made them thinking vulnerable and wealthy to be protected was the patient. Issues about the hybrid research between human somatic cells and other specific cells. A case. In 2001, Professor Chen Sigu in the Experimental Animal Center of Sun University transferred a skin cell nucleus from a 7-year-old boy into a rabbit denucleated egg and created an embryo. He had been able to grow the hybrid embryos only to the state at which they remain a cluster of undifferentiated cells. For scientific point out, the Professor Chen's case violated the human dignity, and this was a big challenge to the human life. The argument is such a mixed embryo would harm human being safety, and it violates social ethics. If we do something we do not really understand, this is dangerous to human being in the far long future. One of the reasons someone said was that there were not sufficient human eggs to meet the need of the proposed research. So they did such research for think up that there are not enough human egg. issues on IRB, we can know from Article 9 should the ethical guidelines for research on human embryonic stem cell, the ethical committee should be established in any institute which engaged in human embryonic stem cell research. The members of the ethical committee come from the field of biological, medicine, law, or social sciences, and etc. The duty of ethical committee are to do scientific and ethical reviewing, counseling, and surveillance on human embryonic stem cell research. From the Article 10, we know the ethical guideline for research on human embryonic stem cells. Any institute which engaged in human embryonic stem cell research should make own conduct guidelines. So consider the situation of Chinese ethics committee in recent years. If the stem cell research only reviewed by their own institute ethics committee, we bioethicists wonder how to guarantee the stem cell research. The Central Institution Ethics Committee should be built and authorized to the institute which engaged in human embryonic stem cell research, and review the conduct guidelines and administration procedures made by institute which engaged in human embryonic stem cell research. The big problem or an unclear statement in Article 9. The members of the ethical committee come from the field of biology, medicine, law, or social science, and etc. There are no bioethics. We wonder why bioethics are absent in the members of the ethical committee, and there are many articles in the guideline about certain requisite on qualification of research personnel, technological equipment, administration in the HEL Cell Research Institute. And there is no punishment to the research persons or the institute which disobey ethical guidelines in research. The hope, thinking of the traditional view of China about the embryo, reveal that only a few bioethicists were invited in the symposium of the stem cell research, knowing that there were not many scientists who attended the international symposium in 2002 and 2003 paid attention to ethical principles. We bioethicists hope and call for the researcher following the ethical guideline. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. We have time for a question. Any questions? Yes, Heiko, please.
I thank you very much for your very impressive presentation. What you tell me leads me to understand better what my colleagues in Eastern Germany think. You said that there is some discussion about the value of the human embryo. So I would like to know who are the persons who argument or who argue on and refer to the natural law. Who are the persons, and to what group do they sociologically refer? Can you say this? Are these Christians, for example, or to what group do they belong?
So in my presentation, and all bioethics agree the 14th April can do research. This based on the medical reason. And I don't mention about the nature law in my presentation. Do you really? This is and what? Oh yeah. And some from the ethical reasons, we think such embryo, such a class of cell, they have no consciousness before some life come, no life come. So in this time, think about much of patients and some the interests we want to got for patients, for research, for medical development, something about. So we think we use the embryo is better, and at least yes, we should very forbidden someone who who use some cells from some women no informed consent or something. We think most of the better we use the embryo from the abortion from the IVF spare embryo. This is the best resources.
Last question, Sophia, please.
Okay. So I just have one question, because when I heard from your presentation, it seemed to me that in China you do a lot of the research in stem cell and this kind of the biotic thing, and then I just want to know that do you do some research related to the organ of the dead people? For example, if the people that donate their cell before they die, do you have some research that take some organ of the dead people, like the egg of the women who just pass away within 24 hours, because the egg still okay, right? Instead of take the egg from someone and mix with the skin of some animal, whatever. Because for me, I'm just thinking about the respect of the being, not only the human.
Yeah, thank you. We do respect to the value of embryo. We try to find many ways to find the embryo. So your suggestion is really good. In fact, in China, many scientists they have done something, try to use the adult resource. So your resource is good.
Okay, very last question then. Thank you.
Please speak.
Very nice presentation. I would like to know a little clarification. Why do you limit to 14th day of the fetus? Why not we need to respect from the time of inception, I believe. First question. Why do you limit to 14th day? I believe life has to be respected from the time of inception itself. Secondly, you mentioned about volunteers. Are they forced or are they paid? In what ethical level you call them as volunteers? What is the ethical limit you follow?
You want to know whether we use the embryo before 14 days. This much of person ask this question. From the first drift, we about the stem cell ASCO guideline of stem cell research. We read a lot of materials from UK of USA. We think UK. We follow the UK standard. The reason is, many Chinese people they are patriotic. They think Chinese should not develop quickly. We don't want to. We don't. If USA can, if UK can, we should follow them. But this is one reason. For our bioethics, we really think this 14 days embryo. If destroyed, before destroyed, we use them. Another reason is from Chinese ancient theory. For example, Confucian, a person began after birth, after delivery. So there are so many reasons about this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation, and UNESCO also. And as you see, my subject is chances and risks of biobanks, and my central point is biobanking, ethnic monitoring, and data protection of special population groups. Scientists set very much hope in the collection, treatment, storing and distribution of human tissues from different populations. However, they regularly do not face the benefit of the donor, apart from a potential indirect benefit due to the development of medicines for the donor or the patient in the industrial states. For this situation, we can find a lot of examples. I would like to add two more, not so well known but extremely current. The first one is the Macedonian, and the second one, the Genographic project. It is a little known that Macedonia is setting up a DNA data bank. The data bank has various goals. On the one hand, the genetic diversity of the Macedonian population and the minorities. On the other hand, the correlations between genetic diversity and genetic diseases. For this purpose, a genealogical data bank is being set up. This biobank is financed by the Macedonian government. It encompasses 3 different research and project areas as shown in the following diagram. No, it's not the following, but this one. Defining populations and samples of human genetic material in this anthropological research is an explosive subject because the samples are structured and defined according to the following criteria: population, nationality, language as mother tongue and second language, and religion. Particularly from an ethical point of view, it is more than problematic to use these criteria because no information is given if the concepts of these criteria are in accordance with the concepts of the involved ethnic groups, because the results of the research may be abused with regard to ethnic groups. Second, the problem of self-identification of individuals and groups. Third, using these criteria, the results of the analysis of the research may be abused to discriminate ethnic groups.